Today, we'll be dissecting the captain of the Fool's Troop, Brant. While diverse in color and cheerful in personality, some design choices of his, which we'll be looking at, do contradict this. Having his model in the overview, you can see his frame is quite broad. A lot of the Renacida characters are very flared in their design, but I feel like he is almost more flared, kind of resembling not really a circus tent, but that vibe, if you understand what I mean. Starting from the front, we do have his iconic hat, which he plays around with in almost every cutscene I've seen. We have his fluffy looking cyan hair, his very big collar, as well as the puffy sleeves, and the very big V-cut plunge, which we'll be looking at later more in detail. More puffy clothing, along with a bit more tight-fitting pants, which I didn't really expect from his design, but he does seem very top-heavy, along with boots that do go up to his knees. Looking at the side of him, you can see that his hat is very, very big. As I've said before, it is a very big point in his design, and not only does he fiddle with it a lot, it is very extravagant with lots of feathers and other details we'll be looking at later, which I can already say I'm very impressed with. They really did a lot on this model, and I look forward to seeing the same kind of quality on other models. Now, aside from the collar being generally big on the front, you can see on the side it kind of covers half of his face. Along with the puffy clothing, it does extend quite far back, going down to almost his knees. Looking at the back of him, I feel like you can see the puffed out design even better. A lot of the sleeves go far over his hands and reach down to his lower thighs, even if just spread out like this. Besides that, surprisingly, there is not much to say about the back just yet. Looking at the last side of him, you can see that the arm and pretty much everything else was mirrored again, though I am happy to say that the cape actually wasn't. Starting from the top, they did put a lot of thought into his upper design. He is very top heavy, and you can actually see this because a lot of the elements in his upper half do clash. Cyan is the direct contradictory color of red and or magenta, if you want to go that way, and it generally draws a lot of attention to his face. Not only does he have cyan hair and pink tips, which again contradicts, so they're much easier to see, but his face is also quite framed by it, making his eyes pop out more. Talking about his eyes, the actual irises are a lot less detailed than characters prior, but he makes up with that with eyeshadow. Looking at his face model this way, I do find he looks quite similar to a lot of the other face models. I'll put up a comparison here, but you can see that his eyeshadow is a really nice gradient, matching very well with his irises and going into a dark purple color. I think it's quite funny to imagine he sits in front of the mirror every day, making these really sharp eyeshadow edges. It just makes him that much funnier. Also to add, he does have tiny earrings. I think Shenli Yao actually has quite similar ones, but personally, I would have preferred if he had bigger ones, kind of more fitting to his personality. Since we can already see he's quite top heavy, I don't think a little bit more of an earring would have hurt. Maybe like a little anchor or just like mismatching earrings would have been cute. Looking at his hair closer, you again can see the little pink highlights as well as a lot of extra layers from his bangs. I didn't really see this in the model because the hat is always on top of it, but this is a really cute detail. Now, something I didn't know and I find quite weird is that his head has a dent. Let me yoink his hat right after importing him just to show you I didn't change anything. He's dented. My boy is dented. No, got the headset dent. He got the headset dent. No. Anyway, something I didn't really notice due to his big ass collar is he actually has a little gradient at the back of his head. I think this is really, really cute, and I don't really know why it's covered up. Like if I do this, if I put it back, you can't even zoom that much in the game. I find that really sad. Oh, it's so cute. Moving on from his hair and going up to his hat, you can already tell this is very detailed. Looking at the hat closer, you can see it is really shaped like a pirate's hat, having this very wobbly shape as well as having a very big head hole for his. You can see these little triangles all over it, as well as this like dotted or almost woven pattern at the top. You can see that there's these little leaves or feathers printed all over it. It kind of reminds me of like older fabric, not quite Rococo, but kind of like it. He has stars and dots on it, as well as this flap. I don't really know what this is for, but you can see it starts inside of here and then folds over to be like attached by a button at the outside. At the back of it, there is a little logo as well as all of these feathers. These are actually all separate and I can take them apart into little bits. Aside from the main feather, they also have like little bits and pieces hanging off of them, I suppose for more movement in the wind. The feathers themselves are all attached by this button, which is double-sided and actually has a texturing error at the back of it. I don't really know what this symbol is. I surprisingly haven't played a story quest yet, which I will definitely be doing this weekend, but it might be some kind of shell or conch. Lastly, on the front of it, he does have writing, which I suppose is for the Fool's Troop, having half a mask and what I assume to be his saber. Moving further down, we have a lot more layers. Starting off with his collar, it is double-sided. On the inside, he has this diamond-shaped like pattern with gold lining it out and being in two colors, very bright pink as well as a darker magenta. This again has the dotted and or woven pattern. Oh, he's hollow inside. This goes all the way around but is a little bit darker at the back, assumingly for the shader in game. Not only the diamonds are aligned, but also the outside of the collar goes all the way around in gold until it fades into white here. The outside of it is pretty much just black, having these seams on the outside of it and featuring these golden stripes as well as a magenta back piece, but we'll look at that after the arms. Looking at the sleeves, which are pretty much the same, they start off with this very flared kind of sleeve, which does cut off into a more ruffled-like pattern. This then continues a bit smaller, being more of a form-fitted sleeve, along with these little red bands, and then ending in a piece that looks a lot less like cloth and more like a kind of guard or at least plastic. Looking at the sleeve closer, you can see that they decided to embed shading. Now what this means, aside from the folds and the clothes, he has a set dark blue gradient. I assume his usual sleeve is the cyan color, but due to the huge cape, they just decided to make this dark blue. Also more noticeable here, which we will get to later. Going down to the ruffled part, he has a lot of pattern going along this. I don't really want to assume this is any shape, though if you want to, I suppose you could say they're kind of like palm tree leaves or something like that. Maybe because he's a pirate and he sees palm trees, I don't really know, but they do kind of look like leaves. Going down, the ruffled part is, well, ruffles, and then this more form-fitting part is just cinched down with actual buckles of a red string. It then continues into, like I said, the more plasticky thing, which does wrap around his hand. Looking at his hands, I was a little bit disappointed. He has such a flamboyant or at least dramatic personality that he wears eyeshadow and is generally very, at least somewhat colorful. He does wear a lot more muted colors, but you know, I would have at least assumed he would have worn some kind of nail polish or something. But since I'm the one that has this model, and I can actually go ahead and just, you know... Do you see the vision? I see the vision very well. I'm doing it very lazily. I'm literally just painting over the texture, so there's nothing good. But, you know, I mean, but that probably would have been too much, I'll be honest. Going back to his chest, since both arms are pretty much the same and the layers above it are just his cape, we do have his very plungy neckline. It is the main point of his design and something a lot of players reacted positively to, at least in the male liking space, and me personally, I do really like it as well. Not only because going honk honk is an instinct at this point, but because it defines his tacit mark really well. Aside from the cutout part from his shirt, his chest actually goes a lot lower. Like, we can go all the way down here, which again has the set shading he has from the straps he wears above this, but also something that I don't think it's a belly button. I think this is just more abs, but you know, I mean, it goes all the way down here, which, I mean, maybe not. I'm looking way too much into this, I'm sorry. Now above this, he does wear a lot of detail. Not only does he have 2 big anchors stringing beaded chains all over his chest, as well as these like disconnected teardrops, but he also has his very deep plunge line being lined by this flaming ruffle, as well as these stripes going cross over it. As I mentioned before, they did put block shading, meaning the underside of it is just dark blue, but I don't really know if this is an accurate color or just so they wouldn't have issues in the game. The entirety of his outfit is constructed of 4 to 5 layers, starting with this dark blue shirt, going up to this white vest holding his cape, as well as this one which holds his anchor and his collar, the underside of this sleeve, which I assume is just like an undershirt he wears, and then this very saturated color pattern at the top. Since we already talked about these 3, let's talk about his cape. Now, his cape makes a lot more sense than a lot of the other characters wearing one. I'll be very honest, I don't really understand why the other characters have their capes being all cut up and hanging on threads when he can wear a little vest to just hold it, but I digress. Now along this white layer, we have again a lot more textural details, not quite having the triangles he has on his hat, but instead little squares with dots inside of them. Now aside from the anchor, the front does feature a lot more flag-like patterns. This does kind of look like those festive flags you would hang up for festivals, just in a solid golden color with this logo on it. It again has stars and does also have this hidden, almost shoulder guard. I suppose just to have his collar being a bit bigger, but it does kind of look a little bit awkward just jutting out of here. Now as you can see, the inside of it is pink, but the lining of it is just kind of a little weird. It has this silver-like jutted pattern with more pink on the inside. The backside of it is more white with golden pattern and brings back the techie type holes, which I wish they would have moved away from. If you remember, the Jinsho characters all had these, which the common theory was to just make them more cyber or techie. I hate these. I personally hate these. Staying on the back and moving further down, you can see that the sides of the capes are actually different. On one side, the cape kind of goes into strands, being striped with magenta, white, and blue, and featuring more of these diamond-like stars, and then going down into a completely different color scheme. The lower part is a bit more extravagant as it features these golden masks, as well as golden diamonds. The other half is actually two-sided. Starting with the underside, you can see there's more of these color blocks, going from purple to a darker and lighter blue, and it all being outlined in magenta. It has more writing on the inside of it, though I don't think this translates to anything. At the bottom of it, he not only has these diamonds, but also the teardrop-like shapes he has on his chest. The outside of it has more of the same color scheme and is just lined in gold instead of magenta. And this one actually features the same writing as his hat, again which I assume is the Fool's Troop. Now, something you don't really see because of his puffy outside layer, if you pay attention to the outline of his pants and then just go inside, you can kind of see it lines up with his coat, as the upper half is actually connected to the underside of one of the upper layers. Meaning, if you follow the line of his jacket and ignore this puffy layer, you're left with this. This man is snatched, okay? Look at this. Why is he so snatched? Holy shit. I mean, you can kind of assume that since he's very ripped, but I didn't think he'd be this snatched. Now, without trying to lose my mind, the inside of this white layer does continue all the way around, which is a first, as a lot of the KuroGames designs are known to just stop midway at some sections, but it actually does go around. It has more of these golden details, a flexible looking black inside, as well as it scrunching up over this little belt part. It has actual buckles! Oh my god! What the fuck? The jacket then ends in this little fin-like looking cut. Going back to the front and moving further down, since he's so top heavy, there isn't much to say about his pants. Zooming into them, we again have the set shading with 4 little buttons, a belt buckle over it which holds his mask, which we can look at closer in a second, but this belt just goes all the way around without cutting off. He has an actual belt buckle. I'm losing at KuroGames. Thank you. Going further down, he has this weird kind of cutout. I don't really know what this is for. I guess it's just to make the pants look a little bit more interesting. I don't really think this is 2 separate layers. Looking at him from the side, I can't really decide for myself if I think he has ass or not. He is kind of caked up, but I think his is the same size as Shangliao and Jian's. I'm not really sure. Why am I talking about ass cheeks? Now, again, since I am the one with the model, you know, I can just, you know, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt anyone, right? Just gonna, you know, I mean... While we're at it. Looking at the mask, it is very extravagant, having more of these leaf or feather-like patterns you can see in his hat, and generally having a diamond-like pattern on one side and just being plain white on the other with just a logo on its cheek. And the inside doesn't really have anything to add. Moving down to his boots, you can see they are a lot less saturated than the rest of his outfit, being majorly dark blue and light blue with a little bit of magenta and a faded golden, almost yellow-like color, stringing the shoe up into a bow. There isn't much to say about these other than more of this patterning, and the lower part of it, in contrast to his outfit, being kind of boring. There really isn't much to it aside from the all characters must have heels policy Kuro has, and the underside of it. The underside is a bit more detailed in the footstep-like pattern, having all of these ridges, as well as more of this logo and these little crosses. Something else that I found really cool is how layered this outfit is. Not only do you have all of these layers which are actually functioning this time, but they also have a separate gold layer just to make the details of his outfit pop more. But he really has just another layer just for the golden details to pop more, as well as the second one for more of these details and the pattern of his hat. Another thing you can see better on his texture is his eyeshadow. Now most of this is covered up by his lash down here, but looking at this closer, it actually takes up a lot more of the eye, which the eyelash just covers. Besides that, you can see his teeth and his tongue, as well as one over his iris. Here we have the textures for the upper half of his model, as well as the lower half. Now really weirdly, this texture is called down, which would signal the lower half normally, but it actually has his hat down here, as well as the mask inside of the hat, but okay. Looking at his sword a little bit, it does fit very well to his outfit. It has a little dangle on it which does reflect in his cape, as well as these golden details and the straps. The only thing inconsistent I found are these cybernetic rings around it. Looking at it unsheathed, you can see all of the patterns he has on his hat, as well as familiar colors. When other characters use it, it will get the same flame effect that Brant has. Something else that looks like his weapon is the gun he uses. Now, I'm not really sure where he pulls this from. It might be from the sword, but it does look cool regardless. Now, while he only has these little 2 anchors, another big part of him is obviously this big anchor. I really don't know why they only use this in like little parts of his design. Another detail to him is that half of his mask he actually wears after using the ult, while the other half remains at the bottom. I really love his design, and his design seems very thought out with all of the patterns and things going on, so the team must have clearly put a lot of effort into his design. And with that, I hope your polls go well, since we still have 9 to 10 days left, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye bye.